And he's not going to be in office too long before he's going to have to deal with the First World War in world history. Okay, we'll kind of explain this to you a little bit. So, our overall topic is President Woodrow Wilson and World War I. And our first subtopic is Europe enters into a war. Now what this means is, does the United States get into this right away? No, it's going to be a European war. And we're actually going to try to stay out of it, but we're not going to be able to. We'll get to that later. Now, when's the last war that Europe had? Think about it. And we were involved in it. After that, Andrew Jackson, Battle of New Orleans, War of 1812, which ended in 1815. Well, from 1815 to 1914, there were no wars in Europe. It was a pretty peaceful time. That's quite a while, really, you think about it. Almost 100 years, right? So from 1815 to 1914, Europe had not experienced a major war. Things were pretty peaceful. Well, that will change in the summer of 1914. Okay, so again, for 99 years, between 1815 and 1914, Europe had not experienced a major war, but that'll change in the summer of 1914.
We're still under European war.
Yep. And what happens in the summer of 1914 is 5 major European countries will go to war. The summer of 1914, 5 major European countries are going to go to war. Now, people were worried about this because what's really changed in 99 years? Technology, very good. The ability of one human being to kill another has changed. And I'm going to give you some examples of, you wouldn't consider it modern technology now, but in 1914 this was really a big deal. You know what we had? Poison gases. So all of a sudden poison gases had been developed. And they are going to be used in this conflict among these 5 European countries. Poison gases, something we didn't have before. We even had submarines. All of a sudden they invented and perfected submarines, which we certainly didn't have before. These don't seem like big modern technology today, but they were then. Tanks. All of a sudden they had constructed tanks. Airplane. They even invented something called machine guns that would fire multiple rounds with the pull of a trigger. Machine guns. And they also developed what we know as long-range artillery. Not like the cannons of the Civil War, but long-range artillery. So some examples of modern technology at the time that scared people and greatly enhanced the ability of one person to kill another in war were poison gases, submarines, tanks, airplanes, machine guns, and long-range artillery. Now, of all those, which one was the most dramatic way to kill people? Not so much. What did people have access to in war that could kill? Think about the Civil War when they were, machine guns. Machine guns was the most dramatic weapon developed and allowed the ability for one to kill another. Remember the old Civil War muskets and rifles they were using where you had to bite off and load one every time?
When was the Gatling gun?
They came up with the Gatling gun towards the end of the Civil War, but they were not perfected too much. But that's a good example. Now, because of these new weapons, what did troops do in this war to protect themselves when they were fighting? They didn't stand face to face like the British. What did they do? They built trenches. Matter of fact, if you look, I'm going to just get this down. I have, and this thing's pretty cool, I have what many GIs packed around on their backpacks during World War I, and that's a trench shovel. This is what they had. They would pack it back here on their backpacks, carried that with them. That was essential. This one's in wonderful shape. This is a World War I. Pass it around. Be careful with it. Trench shovel. And so because of the effectiveness of all these weapons, especially the machine gun, ground troops dug trenches to protect themselves, and this strategy was referred to in World War I as trench warfare. Trench warfare. And it was really used a lot early in World War I. Really. So basically you dig a trench and fight and advance and dig a trench. That's how you gain land. You imagine digging trenches with that particular shovel. Now, the airplane was developed in time to use in World War I, but they weren't very good yet. They weren't very fast. They weren't easy to maneuver. They were pretty vulnerable. But they did use them in World War I. But what they mainly used them for in World War I because of that? What did they use these planes for? If they were not very fast or maneuverable and they were vulnerable, what did they use them? They used them for two things.
Transporting goods.
Well, not so much. They still did a lot of that by sea. Well, close. They dropped explosives where they didn't have to confront anyone, and they observed. They would fly over and find the enemy's position and observe things, and then they would also drop explosives and maybe poison gases. But they didn't get involved too much early offensively. Although they did make some airplanes that were equipped with machine guns mounted on them. But that was kind of a problem. That technology hadn't caught up. Why was that a problem? No. These machine. No, the machine guns weren't synchronized. And so when they were shooting, they weren't, what's synchronized?
Shooting at you.
Yeah. Or in between propeller turns. So they were shooting off their own propellers early in these battles because the machine guns on these planes weren't synchronized. In other words, they weren't shooting in between the propeller, and they shot their own propellers off. So the airplane was used mainly for observation and dropping explosives. They didn't really use them much in battle. Some did have machine guns on them. Didn't work very good because they ended up shooting most often their own propellers. Okay. All right, that then is going to take us to our next subtopic, which is kind of confusing, so we'll have to get through it slowly. And that's European alliances and the spark that helped set off a war in Europe. What started this war between the 5 European countries? What in the world started it? So, European alliances and the spark that helped set off a war in Europe. You know what caused World War I? Alliances. What are alliances?
Like when two groups are working together against another.
Yeah, in other words, allies. In other words, you three here have an alliance that if anybody does anything to you, that you two will help them. And we had these alliances that were breaking up all over Europe. And there were two specific alliances. One was called the Triple Alliance. And the other one was the Triple, and it doesn't sound like it at all. It's not spelled like it. Triple Entente. So you had the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. And each of these alliances, the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente, had countries that were a member of. So we'll just go from this one. Who were members of the Triple Alliance? Germany, and a country then known as Austria-Hungary. One country. Austria-Hungary. Okay? So, you had Germany and Austria-Hungary. Were the two countries that made up the alliance known as the Triple Alliance. Germany and Austria-Hungary. Triple Alliance. The Triple Entente consisted of France, Great Britain, and Russia. France, Great Britain, and Russia. And as mentioned over here, the danger of an alliance is if something happens to one country in this alliance, what do the other countries do then? Step in and help them. So you get people involved in things that are really maybe none of their concern. So the danger of alliances was evident because if one country would get involved in a conflict, all the other countries would then become involved as well. So how did World War I start? Is it a result of this alliances? But something had to be the spark. Well, that spark happened on June 28th of 1914. June 28th of 1914. Now, bear with me here because it sounds a little confusing. On that date of June 28th of 1914, the Archduke of Bosnia, a guy by the name of Franz Ferdinand, and his wife were riding in an open automobile. Okay? On June 28th of 1914, the Archduke of Bosnia, these are on your sheet, a fellow by the name of Franz Ferdinand, and his wife were riding in an automobile. Now, what's Bosnia? Is that your question? It's a province of Austria-Hungary, just like Wyoming is, quote, a province of the United States of America. Bosnia was a state, so to speak, inside Austria-Hungary. And Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were riding in an open automobile through the streets of Sarajevo, which was the capital city of Bosnia. So you kind of picture that in your mind. So the war begins with this spark on June 28th of 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Bosnia, which is a province of Austria-Hungary, and his wife were riding in an open automobile through the streets of Sarajevo, the capital city of Bosnia. Okay? So he's the Archduke, he's kind of important, right? He's got his wife in the automobile. They're in Bosnia at Sarajevo, in the capital city, riding through the streets. Well, as they're riding in that open automobile through the streets of Sarajevo, a 19-year-old by the name of Gavrilo Princip rushes towards the open automobile, fires a revolver, kills the Archduke and his wife. So as this Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife are riding through the streets of Sarajevo, capital city of Bosnia, a 19-year-old man by the name of Gavrilo Princip rushes towards that open automobile, pulls out a revolver, fires, and kills both the Archduke and his wife. The Archduke was killed with a shot to the neck. The Duchess, whose name was Sophie, was fatally wounded in the abdomen, which means she was shot in the abdomen, later died. But the Archduke was shot in the neck and killed in the car. So, let's kind of go through this to make sure we understand again. On June 28th of 1914, the Archduke of Bosnia, Franz Ferdinand, and his wife were riding in an open automobile through the streets of Sarajevo, which was the capital city of Bosnia. As they're riding in that open limousine, open car, a 19-year-old by the name of Gavrilo Princip rushes towards the open automobile, firing his revolver, hitting the Archduke in the neck, killing him in the car, and fatally wounding the Duchess, Sophie, in the abdomen. But we've got an Archduke and his wife dead of an assassination. Yeah. Abdomen, A-B-D-O-M-E-N. A-B-D-O-M-E-N. Now, the thing that was even worse is it was the couple's 14th wedding anniversary, the day they're killed. So this is a bad PR thing, okay? You got the Archduke, Franz Ferdinand, his wife, Sophie, the Duchess, both killed by Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old in the streets of Sarajevo on the couple's 14th wedding anniversary. Well, Princip actually turned the gun on himself, but he was wrestled to the ground by police and put into custody. So he was going to be like a murder-suicide. And he put the gun to his own self, but before he could fire, he was wrestled down by police and taken into custody. What are the two things they charged him with? Murder and treason. But he couldn't be put to death because capital punishment for underage offenders was illegal. And he was too young to be put to death. So he went to prison for killing the Archduke and his wife. Okay? So he's charged with treason and murder, but was not put to death because capital punishment for underage offenders in that country was illegal. Like 21 was the age. Well, Princip actually died in prison 4 years later, and he never repented his crime. When asked about it, he said, "I do not feel like a criminal because I put away the one who was doing evil, and I thought I was right." Okay? So, he gets put in prison, he dies 4 years later in prison, but he never repented his crime the entire time he was in prison, saying, quote, "I do not feel like a criminal because I put away the one who was doing evil. I thought I was right." Well, the problem was Gavrilo Princip was from Serbia. And Serbia was a country that was conflicting with Austria-Hungary. Okay? So Gavrilo Princip is from Serbia, and Serbia was a country that was conflicting with Austria-Hungary. So what do you think happens after the assassination? Austria-Hungary invades what? Serbia. Absolutely. Austria-Hungary, upset with the assassination because the kid's from there, invades Serbia. Well, here's where the alliances get crazy. Who was the Austrian government backed up by? Germany. And their leader was Kaiser Wilhelm II. And because they backed Austria, Russia declared war on Germany. Okay, because Germany backed Austria, Hungary, Russia of the Triple Entente declared war on Germany. Obviously they were enemies, right? So who is Russia backing? Serbia. Okay. Well, here you go. Who's an ally of Russia? France. So what does France do? They also declare war on Germany. And then Germany declares war on Russia and France. So this is how these alliances got involved in this. I wouldn't, you never can call an assassination a minor thing, but we're going to have a world war in which the United States is going to have to get involved here because of this assassination. Does that make sense? That's what alliances do for you. So let's repeat that. So, the people of Serbia were not compliant with the Austrian government. This assassination Franz Ferdinand was looked at as an act of terrorism against Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary invaded Serbia. They were backed by Germany and Kaiser Wilhelm II. Russia got upset with Germany get involved. They declare war on Germany. France is an ally of Russia in the Triple Entente. They declare war on Germany. Germany declares war on both Russia and France. Well, from this point in the conflict, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and anyone else that decides to join their side in this war are going to be known as the Central Powers. So I guess in terms of history, they're the bad guys. Okay? So when the war gets going, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and anyone else that wants to join their cause in Europe will be known from this point on as the Central Powers. It's even a little crazier here because you're thinking to yourself, who's out of the picture here so far? Who's not involved in this thing? Great Britain. What are they doing? Well, we'll see what's going to happen in Great Britain. Okay? Well, the Central Powers have a plan. They're simply going to march into France, defeat France, march west into France and defeat France, and then turn east into Russia and defeat Russia. Well, what was the shortest route through France if you know your geography? What country do you have to go through? Anybody know? Belgium. Okay? And so the shortest route for the Central Powers to go into France would be through the country of Belgium. Belgium involved in this thing? They're a neutral country. They're not involved in any alliance. Okay? Well, the king of